Welcome to the Living History channel. Today, we're delving into the intriguing world of medieval princesses and exploring why you might want to think twice about stepping into their shoes. Births of these noble figures were celebrated with grand gestures, heralds announcing their arrival, bells ringing, and cannons firing in jubilation. Freshly born princesses were treated to a delicate ritual, their mouths adorned with honey and wiped with fragrant rose water, while vassals showered them with lavish gifts. At first glance, it might appear to be the most auspicious beginning, but have you ever wondered why being a medieval princess might not have been as desirable as it seems? Let's uncover the lesser-known aspects of their lives. Why did these princesses find themselves sitting on bread and milk of all things? Was it truly the case that they were betrothed at a mere 2 years of age? What was the genuine appearance of medieval beauties, and did physical beauty hold such significance for a princess? Could love be a factor in their marriages, or were they bound by other motives? And what about the most notorious marriage scandal involving a medieval princess? Additionally, why did princesses endure the peculiar restrictions of having their teeth filed, hair treated with lime, and eyelashes plucked? Why were they forbidden from gazing out of windows? Transporting ourselves back to the Middle Ages, we'll experience life through the eyes of a genuine princess, evaluating whether it truly was a life worth coveting. If you envision being called by romantic names like Isabella or Beatrice, think again. Historical records reveal that conventional names such as Mary, Anna, Elizabeth, Catherine, and Jane, also known as Jean, were prevalent among princesses. Nonetheless, more exotic monikers did exist, such as Princess Mafalda, Berengaria, and even Urraca, who boldly waged war against her second husband and led her own troops into battle. For our current journey, let's set the stage in the year 1656, and our princess is named Margarita Teresa, famously depicted in a Velázquez painting. But hold on, what sets an infanta apart from a princess? In certain realms, the titles of prince and princess were reserved solely for heirs to the throne. Other royal offspring were honored with the appellation of infante, which translates to child. Our story centers on Margarita Teresa, a member of the Habsburg family, known for their strong family ties despite their, shall we say, less appealing appearances and health issues. Her younger brother Karl grappled with physical limitations, struggling even to chew and speak due to the notorious Habsburg jaw. Let's transition to the start of Margarita Teresa's day. The servants are ushering in her morning meal. One might expect a feast of exotic delicacies, including pineapples, partridges, and nectar. However, reality takes a different turn. These princesses were, to put it plainly, not indulged in culinary extravagance. The medical beliefs of the era dictated that coarse food was detrimental to children, and excess was frowned upon. Consequently, their diets consisted of modest fare like bread and milk, accompanied by milk porridge, nuts, apples, honey, and broth. Meat, fish, sweets, and pies were reserved for special occasions, not to be enjoyed until the age of 7. Fast forward to Margarita Teresa's 5th year, a significant milestone as many medieval children faced precarious survival rates during infancy. The proximity of living conditions and the limited state of medical knowledge contributed to the risk of early mortality. When prayers proved ineffective, medical treatments like bloodletting and potions were employed. Even a bath accompanied by an enema was considered a medical intervention. Sadly, this kind of treatment often led to the untimely demise of princesses, princes, and other noble offspring. A heart-rending example lies in Queen Anne Stuart of England, who lost all 17 of her children. Intriguingly, historical statistics indicate that the average medieval princess gave birth to 6 children. Poor health among children was exacerbated by factors like the drafty interiors of castles, subpar water quality, and the incessant travel of royal courts, which traversed the kingdom visiting vassal castles. Our Infanta Margarita Teresa's breakfast is concluded, and now it's time to dress for the day. Margarita is cherished by her parents and adored by the entire court. Terms of endearment like angel from her parents and my joy from the king grace her daily life. In an early portrait captured when she was a mere 3 years old, she radiates a sense of enchantment. Her presence is constantly surrounded by attendants, as strict Spanish etiquette dictates that even a glass of water must be presented in a certain manner to an infanta. Now, let's address a common misconception. Medieval princesses didn't exude the fragrance of roses. A glaring challenge of the era was the pervasive stench brought about by inadequate sanitation and hygiene practices. It's safe to assume that the allure of residing in a medieval castle would swiftly wane in the face of its pervasive odor. Surprisingly, even the renowned Louvre lacked restroom facilities. Courtiers could resort to sitting on windowsills beside open windows, while kings and princesses relied on chamber pots and vases, their contents discreetly disposed of at a distance. As conditions became unbearable, the French royal court resorted to relocating to different castles. A curious instance occurred at Versailles under Louis XIV, where courtly belles would nonchalantly relieve themselves in corners during conversations. The influence of lice was so strong during this time that a French princess met her demise due to these pests, as lice were ironically referred to as God's pearls and were bizarrely associated with holiness. And the nighttime torment of medieval folk was not the result of fairy tales, but rather bedbugs, an unwelcome reality.
This video is brought to you by Thorum. Take a look at these rings. They have rings made from 4 billion-year-old Gibeon meteorite and genuine 65 million-year-old T-Rex bone. If you are a fan of Vikings, they have Odin ring, the Norse god of war, the Thor ring, and all of them are crafted by hand. Head the link in the comments and use promo code LIVINGHISTORY to get 20% off a truly unique ring.
Returning to our Infanta Margarita Teresa, her morning ablutions are complete, and she's adorned in a rose-scented gown, freshly laundered undergarments, and a delicate dress. It's time for the day's cosmetic rituals, many of which you might consider declining today, even under the threat of severe consequences. Medieval fashion was known for its cruelty, and the appearance of princesses deviated significantly from our contemporary ideals. In the early Middle Ages, a balding archetype was considered fashionable. Princesses endured the complete plucking of their eyebrows and, astonishingly, even the removal of both upper and lower eyelashes to attain a high forehead. This involved the application of a rare mixture of quicklime to the hair roots, followed by a daily concoction of water hemlock juice, bat's blood, and quicklime soaked in vinegar, a process that often led to skin damage along with hair loss. Additionally, a prized feature for these princesses was having discolored, decayed teeth, as a set of pristine white teeth was associated with lower social status in medieval Europe. It's intriguing to note that Queen Elizabeth II of England popularized the trend of blackened, rotten teeth. Those unfortunate enough to possess healthy teeth were compelled to blacken them to avoid standing out and conform to the prevailing beauty standards. Blonde, light red, and notably curly hair were highly coveted traits among medieval beauties. Those lacking these features often resorted to using aged sheep urine to lighten their hair when herbal concoctions failed. As the Middle Ages progressed, fashion veered into unconventional territory, advocating for shortened teeth. Aspiring to be the epitome of beauty, some individuals filed their enamel to give their front teeth a squared shape. This journey into the past poses a compelling question. Would you still be willing to assume the role of a medieval princess? Alright, let's dive back into the story of our fair-haired Infanta. Do you think being a princess involves endless parties and entertainment? Well, think again. Our protagonist was born in Spain, where princesses were subject to true confinement. Even gazing out of their chambers was deemed improper. Margarita Teresa, our central character, was born in the Queen's quarters within the Alcazar Palace. While surrounded by numerous attendants, it was in France, England, and Italy that princesses truly participated in the court's festivities. This divergence in upbringing often led to misunderstandings in their marriages. Eleanor of Aquitaine, accustomed to merriment and troubadours, struggled with the solemnity and tedium of her marriage to Louis VII. Similarly, the demure spouse of Henry VIII found it challenging to adjust to her husband's lively court. But if not revelry, what other pursuits occupied the confines of the royal court? The answer is quite straightforward. Needlework, embroidery, studying religious texts, exploring foreign languages, as well as engaging in studies of geology, history, and other disciplines. In essence, princesses spent their time studying and indulging themselves in various endeavors, with the sole exception of gazing out of windows. So, what did the future hold for these princesses? In the Middle Ages, women, even princesses, were often seen as imperfect physically and inherently sinful. Some even considered the possibility of not categorizing women as people at all, relegating them to a neutral it. Despite popular romantic odes, the reality for medieval beauties was far from a fairy tale. Husbands could be unfaithful, abusive, or even banish their wives to monasteries. Women were expected to endure these hardships obediently, for they were entirely under their husband's control. Marriage and childbirth were deemed a woman's sole purpose, with no consideration for career or personal growth. However, the plight of a princess was more favorable than that of queens. Throughout European history, no princess was executed or dishonored as queens sometimes were. Thus, princesses faced two primary paths: marriage or joining a monastery. Nonetheless, a select few managed to ascend to the throne. The Kingdom of Jerusalem, for instance, was ruled by princesses Millicenta, Sibylla, Maria, and Iolanta. Similar cases occurred in Europe with beauties like Eleanor of Aquitaine and Isabella of Castile, who was famed for her vow never to wash. So, what fate awaited our Infanta? When Marguerite Theresa turned 12, her engagement to her maternal uncle, the future emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, was announced. Annual reports on her development were sent to the groom, meticulously penned by the renowned Velázquez, who evidently held a deep affection for the young girl. Our protagonist, Margarita, was rather fortunate, considering that some unfortunate princesses were married off as early as the age of 2. History even records cases where a child was wed at 2 and widowed by the age of 10. However, it's essential to note that consummation was typically postponed until the legal age of marriage. Queen Mary Blood of England married for the first time at the age of 38, while Catherine de Bourbon married at 40. Marriages during this era were primarily motivated by political considerations, with love taking a back seat. Interestingly, a princess's physical beauty was not a decisive factor in choosing a bride. Potential grooms only saw portraits of the princesses, which often presented them in a flattering light. Once they met the actual individuals, it was too late. Yet, there were exceptions. King Henry VIII fell for Anne of Cleves based on her portrait, only to be disappointed upon meeting her, describing her as unattractive and refusing to marry her. However, the clever yet unattractive Joan the Lame herself broke off an engagement to Philip of Tarn in favor of marrying Philip of Valois. This decision propelled her to become Queen of France and wield considerable power. But what about love? Could princesses marry for love? Yes, indeed. The French princess Anne of Orleans, known as Grande Mademoiselle, fell in love with a common court count when she was 40. For 14 years, she sought permission to marry him. Eventually, she succeeded, and they married when she was 54. Unfortunately, the marriage ended in divorce just 3 years later due to her husband's infidelity. However, one of the most scandalous tales involves Joanna, the Fair Maiden Kent. This extraordinarily beautiful princess was prophesied to marry the most handsome grooms in England. At 12 or 13 years old, she secretly wed a poor, non-noble knight. A year later, she was compelled to marry one of the wealthiest grooms in England. While she attended the wedding, she adamantly refused to consummate the marriage. A year later, her first husband returned, having gained fame and fortune in battle, demanding that she be returned to him. This caused a sensation across Europe. Joanna's second husband's family even confined her to a castle to prevent her from reuniting with her former lover. Pope Clement himself ultimately ordered their reunion. 13 years after her lover's death, she remarried that same year. A darker fate befell another princess, Cecily of York. After 2 unhappy marriages, she married a poor man without royal approval, resulting in the loss of her title, family, and wealth. However, she ultimately found happiness. Now what about our heroine, the blonde Infanta depicted by Velázquez? Her story takes a rather somber turn. As she aged, her beauty waned, even in Velázquez's portraits. Family traits began to surface. Marriage to Margarita Theresa proved fortunate. She and her husband shared much in common and seemed to genuinely love each other. However, this universal love was confined to Spain. In Austria, she was not well received. Her limited command of the language, foreign origins, and persistent illnesses worked against her. She even appeared less attractive in the portrait Velázquez painted. Tragically, she died young, at the age of 21 during childbirth. Despite professing everlasting love, her husband remarried a few months later. Thank you for joining us on this journey, folks.